Hey Dirt Nerds, welcome back to the Archaeologist Notebook. Today we're talking about the oldest weapons ever discovered anywhere in the world. We'll be breaking the weapons down into 3 categories, and then we'll finally reveal the actual oldest weapon that archaeologists have identified. But what are we defining as a weapon here? In a way, anything could be a weapon. A rock, paper, definitely scissors. But today we're talking about weapons that were specifically created for war and hunting. And we can get into the grey areas later. So let's get things rolling with our first category, firearms. To start off, we're travelling back to a dig in China in 1970. Archaeologists uncovered a stash of bronze objects manufactured in the style of the Jurchen Jin dynasty. This stash included a bronze vase, a mirror, and a cooking pan. But the most relevant find for this video was a hand cannon. It has a barrel 6.9 inches long and 1 inch in diameter, a chamber for gunpowder, and a trumpet-shaped socket. This socket would have housed a long wooden handle. But how old is this hand cannon? The Jin dynasty wrapped up in 1234, but this hand cannon actually comes from a later power struggle between Prince Nayan and Kublai Khan for control of the Yuan dynasty, which Kublai formed in the early 1270s. During their fierce battles for power in 1287 and 88, a group of Kublai Khan's army used these gunpowder weapons to devastating effect. The history of Yuan even notes that the cannons caused such confusion that the enemy soldiers attacked and killed each other. And thanks to their superior weapons and element of surprise, Kublai Khan reduced Nayan's rebellion to dust, and Kublai Khan's reign continued for another 6 years. So this is the oldest firearm that's ever been discovered, but is there any evidence of earlier firearms? Maybe ones that we haven't physically found, at least not yet. The earliest evidence of a firearm might be depicted in rock art at Cave 149 of the Dazu rock carvings in Sichuan, China, part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Baodingshan. One specific sculpture, dated 1128, shows a demon holding what seems to be a vase-shaped bombard. It appears to have flames and a cannonball coming out of it, although we can't be 100% sure. This could also be a lute player, for instance. I personally believe it's a gun-like object, but comment below what you think. Of course, neither of these weapons really resembles what we'd consider a gun to look like, and both of them seem quite inconvenient to use. So when did humans start to make guns more, well, gun-like? It arguably started with the matchlock, which was first seen in the early 1400s. With a matchlock, the shooter would pull the trigger to touch a slow-burning piece of rope to the gunpowder. This was a massive improvement because before, soldiers were having to apply a match to gunpowder with their hand, which, as you can imagine, didn't always end well. Plus, this matchlock gun can't have been much use whenever it started to rain. Thankfully, a solution was found, the wheel lock, first seen around 1500. It worked like a modern cigarette lighter. You pull the trigger, a wheel spins, sparks fly, and the gun goes off. It worked, sure, but it wasn't exactly user-friendly to build or maintain. In deadly combat situations, something simpler and more reliable was needed. Fast forward around 100 years, and the French come up with the flintlock. This is the one you've seen in every pirate or Napoleonic War movie. It's got that classic hammer with a piece of flint tucked inside. The shooter clicks it back, pulls the trigger, and pop, the flint sparks. The powder ignites and the gun fires. This system was so reliable, it dominated global warfare for 2 centuries. You can see this depicted perfectly in the movie Master and Commander. In this frantic chaos of a ship being boarded, you'll notice they only seem to be firing once. And that's because reloading was a slow and deliberate process. So often a single shot is all you get. Hollywood did well to get the concept right in such a chaotic scene. Now, it is arguable that a catapult or a trebuchet are the true origins of all these projectile weapons. The trebuchet was first seen in 3rd century China 1800 years ago, but today we're talking solely about handheld weapons. If you'd like a video about the origins of artillery, then let me know in the comments. But for now, let's go further back in time to look at the oldest swords ever found. And to do that, we're headed to the arid plains of eastern Anatolia, just over 10 years after the discovery of the Chinese hand cannon. In the early 1980s, Professor Marcella Frangipane and her team from Sapienza University of Rome uncovered something way older than the oldest firearm. Along the western bank of the Euphrates River near Malatya, Turkey, lies a natural monument to humanity's earliest experiments with metallurgy and warfare. The Arslan Tepe Mound is where Professor Frangipane discovered one of the most astonishing finds in the history of archaeology, the oldest swords in the world. 3 short swords and 6 long daggers date back to roughly 3,300 to 3,100 BCE, which is almost a millennium before any previously known examples. So what were these ancient swords made of? Well, they represent a very early but surprisingly advanced form of metalworking. The blades are forged by adding arsenic to copper, creating an alloy stronger and more durable than copper alone. But how exactly do we know that these are swords and not just tools or daggers? Well, as it happens, they're shorter than the normal sword length, measuring at 18 to 24 inches, but it's their design that tells us there's more to their story. 3 of these blades were elaborately inlaid with silver, indicating an importance higher than your average tool. But more significantly, they have many of the essential components that define a sword. They have a blade, of course, as well as a guard, a grip, and a pommel-like end. All these characteristics together add up to a formidable ancient weapon. Now, these swords weren't just for the battlefield. They were status symbols. In early civilizations, carrying an elite weapon designed as intricately as this was a way to prove you were in charge, an extension of your superiority. A great example of this display of power is the khepesh, often associated with Egyptian pharaohs and found in some of their elite burials, including the tomb of our old friend Tutankhamun. But what's so interesting to me about these swords is that they were found inside a hall of weapons. They're evidence of what must have been a true shift in civilization. Arslan Tepe was transitioning from a tribal society to a centralized political entity. When you look at the monumental architecture, the flashy burial items like metal ornaments and crystal beads, even the administrative record-keeping on clay ceilings, it's clear what was happening. This was a society starting to develop power, social classes, and centralized government control. And these swords would have been wielded by emerging elites in that society. These are weapons crafted for projecting political authority, and because of their sturdy material and sharp blades, we can assume that they were built to be used. Next, we're taking a huge leap back in time to look at the most ingenious of prehistoric weapons, the bow and arrow. In 1940s Denmark, some bows were discovered in a peat bog in an area called Holmegaard, which is why today we know them as the Holmegaard bows. These bows have been dated to 7,000 BC and were made from the trunk of an elm tree. The bows survived because of the anaerobic conditions of the soil at the site. A lack of oxygen prevented the decay of these bows for literal millennia, which is pretty cool. What I find really fun about these bows is that nowadays they would be considered slightly smaller than the average length of a bow. But surely this can't be the earliest use of a bow and arrow, right? Well, correct. In fact, the earliest evidence we have of their usage is over 60,000 years older than the Holmegaard bows. Found in the Subudu cave in South Africa, an arrow point made from bone has been dated at around 70,000 years old. And if you're wondering, how do we know these 70,000-year-old shards of bone were used as weapons? It all boils down to microwear, specifically these tiny microcracks. Back in 2018, researchers wanted to know, was this bone damaged from hunting or just from sitting in the dirt for 70,000 years? To find out, they got creative with some experimental archaeology. They toasted some bone replicas to mimic aging and shot others into a goat carcass to see what a real impact looked like. When they put the ancient Subudu point under a high-res CT scan, they found both. It had the old cracks, sure, but it also had the exact same impact scars as the test arrows. This is the smoking gun, or the toasted arrow. It proves humans were bow hunting way earlier than we ever thought. To put it in context, this was maybe 20 to 30,000 years before humans had even set foot in what is now Europe. Now, if you're as excited about prehistoric bows and arrows as I am, then you'll love today's video sponsor, our good friends over at History Hit. Legendary outdoorsman Ray Mears made a 3-part documentary for History Hit on the complete history of the bow. In the film, Ray literally makes his own bow and arrows using ancient techniques and then tests them out. It's pretty awesome. You can check it out by clicking the link in the description or just Googling History Hit. Enjoy. So where were we? Right, the 70,000-year-old Subudu cave bows. Their discovery truly changed the way scholars think about prehistoric African cultures. To be able to craft such items in the Middle Stone Age, our species must have possessed elite cognitive function much earlier than previously thought. Now, before we get to the absolute oldest weapons in history, let's have a look at some honorable mentions. These are artifacts that we're still debating today. Are they weapons used in battle or simply tools? Any tool can be a weapon, so it's about figuring out what the primary intended purpose was, and that's not always easy. First up, we're headed to Australia, where archaeologists discovered fragments of a stone axe that has been carbon dated to around 50,000 years old. Now, there's no way of telling how the early peoples were using this axe. It could have been for chopping trees or cutting hard-shelled fruits, even for digging holes. But just maybe they were crafted as weapons to survive in the wilderness. And if we were really going to stretch to the first tool that could be used as a weapon, then we'll have to look at this amazing discovery from 2025. In the Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, which has been a site of great archaeological interest for some time now, archaeologist Ignacio de la Torre and his team discovered a set of nearly 30 bone knives, somewhere as long as 16 inches. And all these daggers have a single serrated edge that researchers say is unmistakably sharpened using stones, judging by the marks they viewed under a microscope. And at the end of these bone knives, a pointed tip. For stabbing perhaps? It's hard to say, especially as they were discovered by an ancient waterhole, where early humans might have scavenged the dead hippos and gazelles for food instead of hunting them. But how old are these bone relics? Archaeologists have discovered that these knives were carved by our ancestors a whopping 1.5 million years ago, which is a massive leap in our understanding of the abilities of early people. Some archaeologists think that this is viable proof of early humans hunting. We'd previously assumed they were often just the first to reach and scavenge the carcass, but what if they were the ones that killed the prey using these knives? And finally, we come to the main event, the oldest intact, undisputed weapons ever discovered. Thanks for sticking with me on this whistle-stop tour of implements of death throughout the ages. These spears were found in Germany in 1992. The land was being cleared for a coal mine when the team stumbled on something curious. Archaeologists had to rush in for a rescue dig to save what they could before the mining tore up the landscape. What they discovered blew the minds of everyone in the world of archaeology. Here, they had a set of wooden hunting spears dated to 200,000 years old. Being the oldest weapons in the world is cool enough, but they were found in a set of 10. This might suggest a team of hunters, meaning our early human ancestors were much closer to modern humans in both social structure and hunting logistics than we'd previously thought. This advancement in early hunting techniques was absolutely vital in establishing humans at the top of the food chain. I mean, they were up against so many species that should have wiped us out long ago. We're talking lions, bears, saber-toothed cats, sharks, and crocodiles, to name but a few. So these are the oldest complete weapons we have from history, easily identifiable as a set of hunting spears. But are there any incomplete weapons? What truly is the earliest physical evidence of humans crafting weaponry? One contender surprisingly comes from a seaside town in Essex, England, a broken end of what was possibly a wooden spear. Made of yew and sharpened to a point, this supposed spear tip was dated to 400,000 years old, making it twice as old as the current holders of the oldest weapon title. Because of its age, many academics believed it was a much simpler tool, possibly a digging stick. It's believed that early humans of that time did not have the cognitive capabilities to craft such a weapon, but since the discovery of the Schondingen spears and the Olduvai knives, we've now realized that perhaps we've been wrong about this. And many now consider this Essex object as the oldest proof of a sharpened wooden weapon. But there's more. You might be surprised to know that the oldest possible evidence we have of human-made weapons isn't made of wood. This discovery takes us to South Africa, this time to the archaeological site of Katu Pan 1. Here, archaeologists uncovered stone points that they believe would have been attached to the end of wooden spears. But how old were these stone points? Well, multiple analysts have concluded that they are 500,000 years old, which is just insane. This possibly predates the divergence of Neanderthal and human DNA. Though we have to bear in mind that with the amount of aging that these stones have gone through, it's very hard to tell if they were truly used for hunting. Many archaeologists don't believe there's enough evidence to know exactly what they were used for. They could have simply been a cutting tool, for instance. Let me know what you think. Is this really the first evidence of humans making hunting tools, or is it simply early humans sharpening rocks for carrying out basic day-to-day tasks? Either way, that brings us to the end of my list. Let me know what you consider to be the oldest weapon that early humans used for hunting or combat. And if you know of any that I've missed, shout them out. New discoveries are being made every week, and our true origins as a species are constantly being rewritten. If you'd like to learn more about these amazing discoveries or the sites they were found in, let me know and I can dive deeper into those. And remember, like, subscribe, click that notification bell, and do not use any of these weapons at home. Thanks for watching.